see. Whenever you are ready to start the streaming, I'll begin the round. Just let me know when you're ready.
Okay, just allow me to set my timer.
Okay, the streaming has started. Hello everyone. My name is Ezeri Chidinma Grace. Congratulations to you all for making this far. I'll be your chair for today's round, and I have very wonderful people with me on the panel. I would like them to introduce themselves with the order they appear on the tab.
Hello everyone, my name is Gavin. I shall be a panelist for this debate. Preferred pronouns he, him.
Hello everyone, I am Sagar, panelist for this debate. I prefer pronouns he, him, they, and best of luck.
All right, thank you all so much. So for team speakers, you can just do your introduction before your speech. Please do not forget to tell us how you want your POIs, and everyone please be respectful of each other's POIs. Let's have a wonderful round. Proposition 1, whenever you are ready. Here.
Okay, can anybody confirm that I'm audible?
You are perfectly audible.
Okay, thank you. My name is Dylan. I'm from RPDA, and I'll prefer my POIs probably around 3 minutes to 5 minutes. And my pronouns are he, him. So let's have a debate. I'll be beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. Chair, for far too long, we think that the American public has had to choose one of two candidates to vote for, regardless of how bad that candidate is, as a sign of loyalty to their political party. We think these limited choices have always been part of a multitude of problems, and we're very proud to propose the motion. Firstly, panel, what does status quo look like? We think that status quo looks like this. 3 things in this speech. Firstly, status quo in the American public's eye, generally has 3 things that are bad for it. We think that there's generally the limited choice that you find, the lack of representation, and the division among the people. We think that at a point at which we have the ability to change something, then we ought to exercise that ability. Onto my characterization of what choice actually is and what third-party candidates look like. We think third-party candidates are those particular candidates that are not affiliated with any other political party. We think that this looks like general candidates that are in the United States that are not affiliated with either Democrats or Republicans. And these are people that generally don't have that much focus on them. We think that then a substantial pivot to third-party candidates is something that we ought to value because of the implications that it has for society. We then think that when it comes to choice, we essentially have limited choices because it trickles down to the fact that you essentially have 2 different candidates to vote for, and in the vast majority of instances, in the United States of America, the general public is not part of the decision making of which political candidate is likely going to be the leader of the party, but that decision is generally made by the political party in and of itself. We think that then that's a problem because it essentially means that regardless of who is going to be chosen to lead a particular political party, regardless of how good they are or how bad they are, you essentially limit the choice of the people dependent on which party they ought to prefer. We then think that at a point at which we have third-party political candidates, we open up doors to a variety of instances whereby we actually have something that has more value in it, and we actually have something in between the two pivots of extremes between the Democrats and the Republicans. We think that when we talk about representation, this is something that's very important, because it's important to note that in the vast majority of instances, you have a very low representation of what the general public in the United States actually wants. We think that the general public needs a substantial pivot to third-party political candidates, because this essentially means that third-party political candidates are those people that essentially bring up the societal issues that affect the general public the most. We think that third-party candidates are very important in today's debate because they're essentially the people that are likely going to drive the most change. And the only thing that serves to be a problem against these third-party political candidates come from the general funding that they don't have because they are not affiliated with a particular political party. So we think that at a point at which we agree that the motion is something that we ought to value, we think that we generally ensure that society goes in the direction of becoming better. We then think that in terms of unity. I tell you this in my third minute. We tell you that the ability to change is something that we ought to value because it's generally something that can make society better. We then think that in the best case scenario, we are likely going to have third-party candidates which actually meet the needs of Democrats and Republicans, but they're essentially in the middle. We then think that you essentially bring a society together and you ensure that they progress together forward rather than having the general public having two pivots of extremes, that being the Democrats and the Republicans, and these people not necessarily being able to choose what actually meets the needs of both parties. We then think that we win this debate on three levels. We think that when we talk about choice, we're best fit for the American public because we generally tell you that when it comes to choice, you essentially have more choice and you have more people to choose from. These people are likely going to have your best interest because they are likely going to have more. They are likely going to want to get more votes in order to run for the next election and also win that election. We think that at a point at which society actually looks at these third-party political candidates as something that they value, it then becomes something that ensures that that societal issues generally are fixed much quicker. Not only societal issues, but political and economic issues as well. We then think that when we talk about social discourse, it essentially comes to the people being united. We think that in general, these people are not united when it comes to who they're choosing. So when you have third-party political candidates, you're going to put people in a position at which they're likely going to have the best possible representation, and this is likely going to garner the most. This is likely going to garner the biggest effect and impression on the people because they're generally going to have a united choice and they're going to support that choice. We think that third-party political candidates are the people that are best for that are going to be bringing up the best possible solutions for society, and these people are likely going to fix whatever issues are currently existent within the current society. We think that when we ought to change something, and it has the best effect on the people, we think that this is something that we value, and we think that in general, we ought to have a certain amount of reparative justice for those that have been left unaccounted for and those that don't really have the general choice to make between who they actually want to vote for because they generally don't have they generally don't have those people that can actually represent them to their full extent. We think that at a point at which we support this motion, you change the status quo. And this is valuable because three main things are then changed. We think that the choice becomes extended, and this essentially means that generally more people can vote and they can actually have the best possible representation. And this also trickles down to the unity when we talk about social discourse and how people will generally relate with each other. With this, we've never been prouder to propose.
House thanks Proposition 1 for his wonderful speech. We now call upon Up 1 for the reply. Proposition 1, are you with us?
Hi.
Okay.
Hello, is this audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, give me a second. I'm setting up. Beginning in 3, 2, 1. Side proposition notices a small mistake in the American political system and decides to change a democratic system that existed for over 2 centuries. What we stand for under side opposition is the continuation of the two-party system, and we see that that is what is most in line with the American public. A few points of rebuttal. All they said was that choice is good and optionality is better. Firstly, optionality does not mean happiness, right? And like their only claim towards this is that representation is going to be somehow better under their side. Firstly, people do have ways to choose who is going to lead a certain party. That's to say that like the person who is most likely to head a political party, say to become the leader of a campaign, is the person that the party thinks is going to be most liked by the people. That's to say that it's going to be that the public do have some kind of indirect say on who is going to become the candidate. However, we say that under their side, when a third party comes about, it's going to mobilize collusion. Let's say that this third party wants to cater towards every single person. Let's just say that it really gets washed out. I'm going to explain this more in my first argument. However, secondly, that this third party has a limited capacity to actually cater towards everyone. Let's just say that they're likely to cater to the most marginalized group, but that means it's only going to be like one of the marginalized groups. They're going to only cater to women, only cater to Black people, and what this does is that it puts off other minorities from actually coming in and supporting them. That's the reason for this is because they do have limited capacity and they don't have the same kind of budget as like a large party does have that existed for like over 2 centuries. They also told you that third parties are more likely to bring up social issues, but they never give you an analysis as to why on our side a two-party system doesn't have the same incentive. Because these two parties have as much they have the incentive to get as many votes as possible, and they will cater towards these people because not voting is an option, and they want to utilize this untapped voting potential. And this is especially true for marginalized groups who do have and who are predisposed to not want to vote in the first place. We think that under our side, we still get the same kind of incentive to cater towards these people. However, secondly, they told you that they want some kind of, for example, political united, like the football team. We tell you that society will be more united under ours, will be more under our side, will not get united under their side, because like the people who stand on the most far right or far left, the people who are most likely to vote, who are more likely to be happy with a two-party system, aren't likely going to meet in the middle, which is to say the place where this third party is going to stand. Our secondly said that politics isn't meant to be united in the first place. Like we need discourse, we need we need discourse, we need different ideas in the political sphere, because that is the point of democracy and deliberation. We're going to be forwarding 2 arguments in this speech. Firstly, on political clarity and why that's important, and secondly, then on why their side gets ineffective legislation and why that's bad in the eyes of the public. Firstly, then on political clarity, their side washes out any clarity or direction politically in the United States. This is true for 4 reasons. Firstly, that there's a mixed bag. That is to say that these people do have a limited capacity to actually care about every single thing that there is. That's to say that because they're third party, they characteristically have a smaller team, they have a smaller budget, and they need to get and somehow they need to cater towards every single problem that everyone cares about. We don't think this is really feasible. Our secondly is that they're a lot more specific. Let's say that individually, if they in a more likely scenario of what these people actually look like, they're likely to only cater towards a certain group of interest later on. And this really goes against the interest of the U.S. public, because the U.S. public is very big and very diverse. They have lots of different interests, and I don't think a third party is able to cater towards every single one of them. The proof of this, that third party, individual third parties, have never been voted in the past 200 years. The third reason why it's why this is true, because they're simply less stable, that they're more susceptible to external influence because they have the pressure to actually get the support in the first place. That means that they have a less solidified foundation insofar as they're new, they're upcoming, and they don't have the backing of 2 centuries worth of experience. The comparative here that under our side, we do have this experience, we do have a larger budget, a larger team, and we are more solid. Our fourth is that they're more likely to engage in empty promises. That is to say that they want to get as much support as possible, and like insofar that they need to get the support, and they don't have like they need like even if there aren't bad faith, that is to say that they do think they are able, that they want to actually actualize these promises. We said it's very unlikely they're actually able to do so simply because they don't have the same amount of experience as you would comparatively. The importance of this argument is that one, it kills the ability to make long-term decisions simply because their side is less like it's a lot less clear, and the message of politics is much more watered down when you have all these influences going into one person that isn't able to make all these decisions by themselves. Our secondly is that it kills confidence in other U.S. systems. That is to say that when you have a sudden shift in democracy, a system that stood for 200 years, we think that it paints a bad image for the United States and all the other systems that go with it. We say that it creates like an air of uncertainty. It creates like a situation where people don't know what is going to happen. We say that's bad in the eyes of the public. Our thirdly is that it pushes for collusion between larger parties, because these larger parties, when they see a third party suddenly coming in and getting all the votes, we say that it pushes them to actually collude and wash out the third party political power. So that there are two scenarios of this. Either the new president becomes a puppet president, that is to say that they have to cater towards both sides, or like they simply don't get the votes because the two parties collude and don't give them the votes to begin with. We say that the first is much more likely simply by the nature of the motion. You get worse democracy also under their side, because like it's not because democracy isn't about people being united and having the same opinion. We say that people disagreeing, as I say, having a two-party system that is characteristically slightly more polarized than everyone meeting in the middle is simply better for the deliberative process. And thirdly, to get more discourse under their side or worse discourse under their side, because now these parties are more likely to engage in bad faith practices, let's say getting votes through dishonest means. And fourthly, it creates distrust in the American public towards the presidential system. Simply when these third-party presidents, when the third-party president isn't able to actually actualize the promises that they made and the reason why they're voted in the first place. We say that this makes a bad president, and we don't think the American public wants a bad president. I'll take your POI.
Do you think that there are people in the middle of the spectrum that need some sort of representation?
Yes, we do. And we think they're going to get representation in the bi-party system anyways, because the bi-party system wants votes from everyone, including the middle class and middle end of the spectrum. The second argument that we want to talk about is why they get ineffective legislation under their side. But firstly, it's headed by an individual with minimum parliamentary backing. That is to say that there's suddenly like a new person, a third party's person who's in the system of parliament and doesn't have their own political party. We say that they need to get they don't have the same kind of backing as someone in already in the system that has this. We say that it creates ineffective legislation on that basis. Our second is because of empty promises. That is to say that they do this kind of thing because they want to get votes. Our third is that they must get support from both sides. That is to say they have to cater towards both sides. And if they do get this kind of support, then it drowns out the effectivity that they're able to actually do in actually the activity of the legislative process. And because there are simply so many promises that have to make in order to win against the other two bidder parties, we say that it's very unlikely they are able to actualize every single one of them. What is the importance of this? In public interest, we say that there are three things. Firstly, the people want a strong and single agenda law. That is to say that as a Democrat, you want liberal laws and you don't want conservative laws. That is to say that they want some kind of polarization or a strong backing or a strong foundation is very important for the American public. We say the contradiction is more likely on their side when you have a person that caters toward every single side. They say you get liberal laws, you get conservative laws. We say that creates discourse simply because people want their own preferences actualized. However, secondly, people want a snappy president. That is to say that bureaucracy is a lot worse under their side when you have to go through the process of catering towards every single stakeholder that is now invested in you simply because you have made all those promises. However, thirdly is that the U.S. public is polarized anyways, and they're informed about this. That is to say that they're more polarized today than ever before. That is to say that there is no urgency to switch. There is no real urgency to cater towards the middle class somehow and change it 200 years worth of American history simply because you want to cater towards this really small demographic in society. And we also have a stricter public that say you want these people are more likely to really want some kind of real strong change in society. For those reasons, we oppose.
The House thanks that speaker for their fine speech. Thank you so much. Proposition, opposition, please do same by dropping in your speaking order. While you do that, may we have the second prop speaker here.
Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So I'll start my speech in three, two, and one. Okay. And so far as this debate has been going, side opposition seems like their entire case is hinged upon the fact that third party candidates are limited in capacity, right? So to cater to their concerns, right, we're going to tell you that limited capacity that they mention as to how they won't be able to cater to marginalized individuals, right? We think that the parties that they talk about in and of themselves, because of the fact that one is leftist and one is rightist, they are not holistic, right? Which means that the party which is going to be in power at that given moment is going to prioritize people who also share the same ideologies, right? Which means that these marginalized individuals, for example, let's say that a leftist party is the one which is in power, it is going to ignore the concerns of the right of people who basically buy into the rightist ideologies, right? We think that when they mention how there is this limited capacity, we think that it exists on both sides of the house. But also, we think that this limited capacity exists simply because there is no focus, right? On our side, we give these third party candidates this focus, right? Which is why we're saying that the substantial pivot, right? We give them that through this pivot. Secondly, in the vast majority of instances, they have societal views, so they do care. They do have an incentive to actually cater to marginalized groups. They are more holistic, right? To warrant this, two things here. Because of what third parties look like by virtue, but secondly, policies that Kennedy, Colonel West pushed forward, policies such as these civil rights, right? But onto my substantive, right? So, in status quo, the Republicans and Democrats have been actively involved in international affairs, and it has not been very helpful because one is leftist and the other is rightist. The problems with this is that there is this overfocus or prioritization that shifts the focus from pressing societal issues to issues that is happening in internationally, right, around the globe. Secondly, it has resulted in competition in that area, which means that they are now trying to compete and showing their powers through engaging in international affairs more than focusing on issues which the Americans are facing struggles with, right? So at that point, you notice how, because these Republicans and Democrats are prioritizing this to showcase their power, they actually do not care or are not giving the American public fulfilling the interests of the American public itself, right? But thirdly, they're not making advances to connect the two ends of the spectrum, right? Fine, we have these leftists and we have these rightists, right? But they don't necessarily care about each other. By having these substantial pivot to third party candidates, we're able to actually make sure that individuals who are leftists and those who are rightists actually get the kind of focus and benefit from everything because these third party candidates operate on an intersection, right? But also, the only solution that we have to this is this substantial pivot, right? We think the interests of the American public are two things. Firstly, peace, and second thing is stability, right? On peace, right? Third party candidates operate on an intersection, so both liberals and conservatives are going to benefit from this. There are no policies which are going to be disadvantaging the others, like what happens in status quo, right? But secondly, on stability, right? Because of this focus on international affairs, they currently face backlash from both the Americans and the countries which they are interfering in, and other countries
Yeah,
around the
right.
globe. Right? This affects the stability of America itself not taken, economically, politically, and socially. Right. So fine, let's talk about how they're facing backlash, right? For example, what is currently happening between Israel and Palestine, right? So, what is currently happening is that America is supporting Israel, yeah? So, Americans do not. Most Americans right now are pro Palestine. So, at that point, you notice how the citizens then lose trust in their very government because it does not care about the societal views about the societal issues. When we have third party candidates, what they're actually going to do is to do things that the public want. They're going to put the public's interests first because that is basically how the government is supposed to function, right? But this is not the case. However, by doing this, they gain the citizens' trust and then solve things such as political instability because they now have the trust of their very own citizens. But by countries, let's talk about how when they face backlash from other countries, it simply means that the kind of trade which was going on between America and those countries is now going to face harm. When that happens, it means that the American economy is going to suffer, which is currently the case. And we think that by actually by this substantial pivot of third party candidates, we're able to mitigate that on our side, right? Substantial pivot leads to things such as progress, improvement of America itself, because there's still societal issues and economic struggles. These things get attention on our side of the house, right? The things such as the nature of third party candidates itself. And thirdly, the pivot not only reassures citizens, but motivates them to be actively participating. Because right now, they have contrasting ideologies, right? The government itself and the individual. So it means that for them to participate in elections, they're going to lose trust in those elections themselves. They're not going to participate because what is the point, really, right? They just know that this party might win, that party might win, and we might not actually get these societal views that we have don't necessarily matter, right? But also, I think if they're not focused on those issues, right, which like they worsen, right? So let's talk about societal issues, things such as civil rights, right? If the
POI.
abuse which is currently happening is not taken, if the abuse which happens can persist, right, it means that it is going to get worse. And at a point in time where they're going to want these third party candidates, we don't think that at that point they'll be able to do anything to neutralize the situation at that point. But also, we think that it is just worth it because of the nature of these third party candidates and the fact that they're going to bring about the satisfaction of the interests of the American public itself. And with that, we've never been more proud to propose.
Now stands the second proposition speaker for that fine speech. May we have up to.
Hi. It seems as if our third speaker is in the toilet right now. Is it possible that we wait for like a minute?
Sorry?
Our third speaker is in the toilet right now. Is it okay if we wait 1 minute?
Sure, but they should hurry.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I said, sure, they have a minute to come and join us, but they should hurry up.
Okay, we'll just start, I guess. Our third speaker's back. We can start. I'm Audrey. I'll still be doing the second speech.
Okay.
Okay, so am I audible and visible?
Perfectly audible and visible.
Thank you very much. All right. Time starts in 3, 2, and 1. 3 things I'm going to be doing today. 1, just one piece of reconstruction. 2, several pieces of refutation. And thirdly, an extension on why third-party candidates are likely to be short-termist and why it's going to be bad for the majority of the American public. But before that, just one piece of reconstruction because we literally only heard like one sentence coming in out of like prop in response to all of Rigo's substantives, right? They told us that, third-party candidates, they want to cater to both ends of the spectrum. They want to cater to the liberal and to the conservative, and that's why that's good. Firstly, we will tell you that it's highly unlikely that they're going to be able to like cater to all ends of the spectrum. That is to say, it is extremely unlikely that you're going to be able to cater to the hardliners of the conservatives or the hardliners of the liberals, because simply that's going to be two extremely like disparate things, and probably they won't even have the effort to go out and reach to them because they're already hardliners. That means the delta occurs in the middle, right? But we will tell you that even in the middle, that's not going to occur, and it doesn't matter. Third party candidates want to cater to the public, because in the end, what happens is that they cannot, simply because of a lack of resources. How does this play out? Two ways. One, the fact that resources are zero sum. There's a limit to resources. There's a limit to the large American budget, right? That means at the point at which they now want to fragment all their efforts and they now want to cater to everyone's like needs, that means that they're going to have to also scatter and fragment their resources. That means what happens is that you get half-baked results, right? You put half of your resources on A, then you put another half on B, then you put another half on C. What happens? You don't get A, B, or C. It's you don't get any one of them, but you get none of those three, right? What happens on our side is that they focus on one issue that they want to care about and they actually solve the problem. That's why it's highly unlikely that you're even going to like have these kinds of needs materialize, because you stretch it out. But secondly, right, let's say that they are able to do this, right? Let's say that they have the proper issues that they want to think about, right? We will tell you that it's still impossible, because what's going to happen is that there's going to be things like legislation gridlocks, because now these third party candidates, they don't have enough bipartisan support to pass laws. Understand that the way that the American legislative system works is that it goes through multiple layers, and it's extremely bureaucratic. That is to say that even if the president says that he wants to do A will not necessarily happen if one, the Congress doesn't agree, two, if the House of Representatives doesn't agree, and three, if the Senate doesn't agree. What happens is that these three like groups of people, right? They're already extremely bipartisan. They're already extremely like disparate. That means that it's unlikely that they're going to get support from these people, because right, let's say that they want to get these resources, right? It's also impossible for them to be able to suddenly cater to people's needs, because they need to make concessions. They need to make concessions so that these people go ahead and support them, which means that in the end they're going to stray away from the first thing that they already promised. So that means that one, they're probably not going to need it because they're going to stretch it out, and two, that even if they do need it, it's not the core of the issue, because they have to make concessions to get the support of these people. But before we move on to the refutation, sure, what's your POI?
So what does a substantial pivot look like?
I think the substantial pivot to like a third party candidate in the election most likely means that there will be a majority vote for the third party candidate, which means that they're probably going to go into office and they're going to become president of the United States. I think it's pretty clear that's related to it. On the refutation, then one, they tell us, oh, you're going to get more autonomy and the interests are going to be met. But firstly, note that they never mechanize this. They never tell us why their interests are going to be met. They just went up and said like, oh, we're going to cater to the interests of the public. Right? But then notice that choices does not necessarily have to more choices does not necessarily have to equate to better choices. The burden is on proposition to prove why the third candidate is going to be better than the two other candidates in all cases. They have to prove why more choice is better. They cannot just assert that because you have more choices, you're going to be making the better choices, or that like it's a better option in and of itself, right? But then we will tell you that in our world, there are still like avenues for autonomy and agency for the average individual in terms of voting. One, because not voting in and of itself, if you don't agree with those two candidates, it's still a form of self-expression and it's still political determination. That is to say, if you don't agree with these two candidates and you decide that you do not want to vote at all, that is still an expression of your agency and autonomy, right? That means that you choose to not vote for anyone. You exercise that type of autonomy. It's just different, maybe, than what Prop wants. But secondly, there are also like election primaries, right? The Democrats hold their primaries, the Republicans hold their primaries, and people vote in them. That means that they do decide who gets to be like at the top of who gets to be the figureheads of these kinds of political situations. But see, legislation, as we told you, through multiple bureaucratic levels, right? That these institutions are likely going to be bipartisan means that there's going to be sort of a deadlock between the Democrats and sort of the Republicans, and that's going to balance it out. What breaks the deadlock then is the court of public opinion, because now that they have to listen to the public to actually break this deadlock and get legislation to pass. That's why, like in and of itself, autonomy is still valued. But then we will also tell you that choice is ultimately worse on your side, because they are going to be lied to. These third-party candidates, they're going to tell the majority of the public that they're going to do this and that, but eventually they're not going to, because of the reasons we told you before, right? Because they aren't going to get the support, which means that choice becomes meaningless on your side of the house, and that's now worse because people are now nihilistic and they're disillusioned because choice is worthless. We think that on your side choice becomes meaningless, and that's so bad in terms of principle. Then they tell us that you're going to get more polarization. But this is easy because we're going to flip this. We're going to tell you that there's worse polarization on your side of the house because now polarization occurs on three fronts. They're going to polarize the people in the middle as well. Because now you have the left wing and you have the right wing, but now you have the middle wing as well. That means it's now unlikely that the middle wing are going to go ahead and appease like the two sides, or that they're going to go ahead in these two like different directions. Most likely they become three separate parties, and that means that there's a war on two fronts for both of the parties. That's going to mean that there's more fragmentation, and that's more instability, more polarization as a whole. Thirdly, then they told you about like, oh, it's going to be better for international affairs for the American public. They talk about stability, peace, and then intervention. Let's go through this one by one. One, on stability. Firstly, the international community cares about stability, and that's true. But we will tell you that on your side of the house, because there's no clear agenda and no direction, like no clear direction as to what American about foreign policy is going to look like in the future, and that's going to cause instability, one, inside the country because people don't know what's going to happen to their own country, but two, outside the country because now they speculate and they don't understand what America wants to do, which means that America is going to lose their soft power and it's going to lose their standings on the global stage because now that people don't know like what they're going to do. That means that stability is going to decrease on your side. You know, peace, there's also less peace because we told you that there's more polarization, which means there's a war on two fronts. There's a war on two fronts for both parties, and two. Like the other option is for them to coalesce and collaborate to go like squish this third party out, and that's going to be bad because there's going to be things like impeachment legislation, gridlocks, and it's going to make like the whole country unstable. Then they talk about intervention, right? People tell you that US intervention is not a product of the bipartisan model. It is a product of public opinion and it is a product of democracy because US helps, because the reason why there was US intervention in a lot of these places in the first place is because the public asked for it. They intervened in Israel because at that time the citizens wanted them to. Joe Biden is like condemning the Rafah situation and he's condemning Netanyahu because now everyone is protesting and they're doing encampments. So it's going to be symmetrical, right? It's just going to talk about what the public wants and they're going to do what the public wants, which is necessarily good. Finally, then an extension of like third party candidates are more short termists. Let's establish what these candidates want. One, they want to stay in power. Why is this the case? One, they get a feeling of fulfillment when they're literally like the best person in the world. They have the most power and they are left wanting more. But two, they also want to see their mission and vision fulfilled, and that's unlikely that they're going to be able to do that in 5 years. But three, there's also pressure from donors and like sponsors to ride the wave of like this independent party leanings of the American public now that the American public wants to do it, which ultimately means, right, that one, they're less likely to opt for like less visible policies like infrastructure because the only thing that they want to do is to make sure that they're going to be in power next, and two, they're more likely to opt into stuff like trendy policies that may just look good on the surface, but when the public change their minds, they're going to be so subjected to the court of public opinion that they don't think about the long term. And we think that's largely bad because that will ruin the direction of the US and what it's doing right now. And contextually, that's also bad because US hegemony is at its worst position right now, which means they're literally going to ruin the entire US economy and the US government for what it already stood for hundreds of years. For those reasons, so proud.
Thanks, that speaker, for their fine speech. I would like to welcome position with speaker.
Just to check, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, so I'll start my speech in 3, 2, and 1. Panel, we think that you have conservative feminists and you have these super liberal feminists. But at the middle, you have people who genuinely want the rights of women to be uplifted. In the middle, you want people who want representation. In the middle, you want people who want change. The people in the middle do not want to be liberal. They do not want to be conservative. The chat here is simple. They want to be human. They don't want any labels. I think this is a very important thing that opposition had to discuss and had to look at here. The idea that there exists a candidate that adds no label to individuals. They had to tell us why that is something that's necessarily bad, right? So clash in this debate, which is generally who's better for like the American political climate, and we'll divide it into sub parts of that clash. Firstly, under this clash, let's look at the idea of who's better for policy making. Very quickly, let's discuss O2's idea about the fact that these people are short-termist in nature because of the pressure and because they want to be able to get into power in the first place at the next election. I think the first thing you should understand here, panel, is that there's a strategic error that happens because of this argument. Because the extent of the analysis says that, look, these people generally want to please everyone, and that's why they're going to be so good. That's why they're going to be so bad, because they've a limited capacity. In the very same breath, they say that people are going to intentionally look at very on the surface policies just because they're short termist and just because they want to get elected in the next scene in the first place. I think that the huge chat here, or the huge problem from opposition, is that they think that third party candidates are a bunch of bad or stupid individuals who only care about power in the first place. And there are a couple of reasons why that level of analysis is unlikely to be true, right? I think the first, we have the fear to probably assume that every single political party is good. But secondly, even if it's not good, we think that the fact that these people are the new thing in the public means that they're much more susceptible to scrutiny that's likely to exist. Which means that even if they become president, there's a certain level of scrutiny that will exist because they are the new people in town. What this means then is that there's a certain level of accountability that they have to enact on individuals. What this means then, by extension, is that the ability to be short-termist is likely going to perish because you have to be able to appeal to these individuals in the first place. I think then that they completely knife their speech by virtue of this argumentation alone. But on our side, why do we think we're able to have better policy making? I think what you have to note here, panel, is that we don't attach labels to policies, i.e., we don't deal with labels the democratic way. We don't deal with problems the democratic way. We don't deal with problems the Republican way. What this means is that we're likely to help the people in the middle who need the help the most. I think this is something you have to notice, panel. At the core of politics are people who need genuine change. Those people do not want to be attached to any single party. I think we're able to do that on our side of the world. Second thing under this idea is the idea of political clarity and the idea that these people have limited capacity to be able to enact these laws in the first place. I want you to note that this layer of argumentation hinges on something. It hinges on the idea that these third party candidates are people who are going to be literally pulled around everywhere pulled around by the nose to come and please every single person in society. I want you to note something that's extremely important and mark my words. First response is the idea that generally in society, we fix problems according to the certain level of importance that they have, right? Look at how we always fix problems that come with women before we do men, because we think that there's a certain level of reparative duty that is likely to exist. What this means is that if it is that there's a problem that exists that harms a bigger group of people in a much more better way, we're likely to help those individuals in the first place. I want you to note then that opposition cannot come here and say this is problematic, because the nature of governance is that people are always going to understand the fact that you have limited resources that you're always going to try to use to its back maximum capacity in the first place, right? But the other thing I want you to note here is that they claim that these people do not have the know-how, and in the same breath, they claim that these people are going to be presidents in the first place. We think that when you become a president, obviously, you're likely to make mistakes like any other person. But we think the presidency exists in a very broad spectrum, i.e., you have advisors that exist, you have people close to you who are very much experienced within policies and lawmaking. What this means is that you're likely to enact the best laws, or you're likely to enact laws that are completely knowledgeable because of the existence of that knowledge in the first place. Quite frankly, we didn't think this idea about political clarity was likely to be a chat that they come with in the first place. But the second thing they deal with is this idea that there's a general push for collusion, the idea that you're going to come together as big political parties and then wipe away every single political party there is. I want you to note something in the response I'm about to give you. And that is, they give this response on their case as well. That is to say that if it is that they say that the political climate in the USA is so polarized, i.e., you have a far right and a far left, the idea that these people will somehow miraculously come together and collude against third-party candidates is unlikely to exist in the first place. What's likely to exist is that Democrats and Republicans are going to up their game and stop become sleepy Joe, stop sleeping in Parliament to be able to enact the best laws possible. We think you're likely to have accountability on their side of the House. Quickly then, what do we tell you? We tell you the idea that you're going to make a choice. Why did we say this choice is meaningful? And note, they didn't listen here. That's why the extent of the response doesn't deal with the initial issue here. Number one, we told you that oftentimes people in America do not have like the best amount of choice because it's only two parties. I.e., most individuals are always likely to vote Democrats because of the conservative nature that is always attached to the Republican idea in the first place. What this means is that oftentimes they do not agree with this idea of being Democrats in the first place. We think that choice is most meaningful when you agree with it and when you make it on the most like educational level. We think there's a certain level of education that exists here because there's an existence of new knowledge that exists by virtue of the existence of a third party candidate. They still don't like listen to this in and of itself. Second idea we give you here is the idea that you have social discourse and like you're likely to get rid of echo chambers in the first place. What does this mean? We told you that because the middle doesn't have a voice, oftentimes they don't engage with issues that exist. What this means is that you don't get the ability to talk about these issues in the first place by virtue of people in the middle. The only thing we get is, oh, we think that you're likely to create like a huge polarization, like by virtue of like the people in the middle in the first place. I think like this is unlikely to exist because we think that the social discourse is likely to exist between people of different demographics talking about certain issues. I think we win this clash thing because we're able to show you that A, choice is meaningful, but secondly, you get much more like discourse and policy making on our side. Super proud.
The House thanks Proposition Whip for that fine speech. May we have Opposition Whip?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, give me a second. I'm making my timer.
Sure.
Okay, hi. If you would like to POI, please unmute yourself because I'm not looking at chat, so it will be ignored. So I'll start my speech in, sorry, 3, 2, 1. The problem with Proposition's case is that there is literally no urgency that stands throughout their speeches, right? The three things that they have said is representation, which both parties are already catering to minorities anyways under our side of the house. So representation will still exist. They never explain why it will be better under their side. They just said, oh, representation will exist under our side. But secondly, they also said peace, right? Which is something that has been rebutted, that saying that triple polarization, because it will now be divided into three different like wings, right? And lastly, about stability, more tension between these three wings means it's going to be obviously less stable, right? So obviously there's no urgency coming from such proposition, right? Which is something that they had to prove from their very first proposition. And by the way, this urgency actually was started out from their second speaker anyways, right? So before I go on into my clashes, I would like to give a few rebuttals to that proposition, right? Let's talk about this one-liner coming from second prop about how like they want to bridge the contrasting ideologies between government and the people that exist currently in status quo, right? Two responses to this. If the ideologies between the government and the people are so contrasting, then that country will simply go nowhere then, right? The reason why a country can exist is because there's a similar ideologies between the government and the people. So when they're saying it's contrasting, I think it's a bit like dramatized, right? Because obviously differences will exist in ideologies, but they won't be contrasting, obviously. But secondly, I don't get how this helps their case, right? Because if independent parties get elected, which is like assuming the best case scenario under theirs of the house, their ideologies are obviously going to be more contrasting than current status quo because they aren't going to be able to cater to both the far left and far right, which arguably takes the majority in our society, in US society, right? So compared to the middle gray area. So let's talk about a few arguments that have been stated by third prop, right? Firstly, they said that they want independent parties to cater to everyone, but then ditches this to say that they don't want this in their third speaker, right? So do you want to cater to everyone? Because that is not possible, right? But do you want to cater to middle, like gray area people? Well, society will not unite either way, because that is the benefit they're saying, right? If independent parties cater to the middle gray area. Why is this not true? Two reasons. Firstly, people later on far right and far left won't suddenly just meet in the middle, right? They won't suddenly just vote for these independent parties. But secondly, politics is not meant to be united. Discourse and different ideas are necessary, right? So when they tell you that discourse will be better under their side, we say that is truly false, right? We think that discourse will be better under ours for two reasons, right? Firstly, the fact is that the middle are swing votes anyways, right? So they're more likely to go to the far left or far right. So either way, discourse will happen under our side, because policy discourse will more likely than not happen. But secondly, right, the middle people are minorities anyways, right? Meaning that they are not going to be able to like they're not going to be able to unvoice this majority, which is like obviously like a problem right now. But at the end of the day, you need the majority to be in the discourse as well, which is something that's not likely going to happen under their side of the house, right? So policy making should not be clash then under their side of the house, because there literally won't be any policies made under your side, right? Like mechanism will not be rebutted since our very second speaker. Okay, fine, I'll take your PI.
Look, like TPCs are not stupid people, right? We told you that in general, we ranked problems according to the importance. In the same way, we're going to fix problems according to the importance and create policies accordingly.
Yeah, but the entire problem is that when we give you a policy-making mechanization by second up, then you should have rebutted that, right? Because what we're saying is that policy-making will not exist under yours of the house, because even if they make policies that cater to the importance of the problems of society, those policies will not pass, right? Because obviously you need votes from like other parties in the US political system anyways. So what we're saying is that policies will not exist under yours of the house. So whether or not that benefits society, it's not like an important thing under this debate anyways, right? So third point coming from side propositions, third speaker then, like they said how like we talked about how independent parties are like inherently bad or stupid, right? We're not saying that they're bad or stupid, right? But they still need support from those who are bipartisan, right? So they have to make concessions to get their support, right? But these independent parties are majorly characterized with two things, right? Firstly, less support, which we have thoroughly discussed. But secondly, less experience, which is something that they miss under third prop, right? The two parties have existed for centuries, right? Of course, they are more experienced, right? Then choice becomes meaningless under their side of the house, because these independent parties cannot go through with what they want, right? Even if they want to, like, even if they are as heroic as proposition makes them out to be, like they really want to fix the problems of society and that they're so good, these policies don't have a guarantee of passing, right? But at the very least, under our side of the house, because there are two major parties, then at the very least, the principle of these policies passing are more likely than not, because you only have like one major like other majority to like cater your votes to. So lastly then, the short and long-term comparative that was like briefly mentioned under second opposition is that what we want is that parties are long-termist, right? Because they want a general like republicanization or democratization of the American figure, right? The reason why they are short-termist is because what independent parties, they're motivated by like wanting to get elected now, right? They might not have a chance to get elected on the next election, meaning that they will go entirely all out in this current election. But Democratic parties and Republican parties, they can still like give out their candidate on the next election, right? Meaning that they're less motivated to do the things that are harmful. For example, like independent parties saying that they align with specific values, but then internally they don't actually align with those values and not actually like providing support for those values once they are in office, according to side proposition, right? So what's the main clash that have been debated under this motion, right? The main clash is which side is able to give better representation of the American public, hence like the pivot of change, right, for the American public, right? So what does the proposition tell you that they want? Even though it's a bit confusing as to what they want, because they have not made it clear under three speeches, but I think generally, right, from second to third prop, they said that they want these independent parties to cater to the middle and gray areas, right? So that the American political system is better catered to those who are in the middle area. Why is this not true? First of all, middle area will still likely lean to one or the other, right? Like left or right wing, right? But secondly, even if there are really citizens who are truly middle ground, that doesn't mean that these independent parties are really gray area, right? They will still have specific values that are inherently left wing or right wing, right? Like if these parties are like pro-choice, for example, but believe in limited welfare state, then the likelihood of public voting for them is lower, because these are opinions you specifically agree with or you specifically disagree with, right? So It's better optionality also, right, under this point. But this is wrong for two things. Sorry, this is not for two things. Firstly, because people have limited capacity, which we have thoroughly mentioned in our first proposition that you have not rebutted once, by the way. But secondly, the reason why the two-party system started was because the US public interest is a centralized representation of a polarized view. The 2 centuries worth of support, aka the ideal system, is in the eyes of the public anyways, right? So lastly, what do we tell you that we want? What we're saying is that there is no urgency to cater to those in the gray area. Why is that? Firstly, we've stated to you that those who are in the gray area, generally, they still lean to the left or the right? They still have values that align to that. So what we're saying is that we're giving a better umbrella for these people, right? Rather than them having to opt into very specific opinions, which these independent parties have, right? Because they're a single candidate, right? They're one single person, meaning that, like the average people, like the average voter, they also have specific opinions and values, right? Making it less likely for the average people to just vote for them because their opinions are just so narrow-minded and so specific, right? So why is that then? Because general direction is more important anyways, which second prop also did not engage with because the independent parties cannot be relied for all those diverse mindsets, right? Exactly why an umbrella is more important, because then we cater to everyone, including to those in the middle to gray area, right? Because at the very least, we give you these two options, right? Whether you are left-leaning or right-leaning, right? You cannot go to the middle simply because that is too specific an option. Because people who are leftists or people who are rightists, they still have specific opinions that maybe not necessarily concede to those of their wings, but still they vote for them because it is a general umbrella, it is a general idea and a general opinion that you tend to agree with, which is why we're very, very proud to stand under opposition. Thank you very much.
The House thanks the proposition which speaker for their fine speech. May we have the opposition reply.
Just checking that I'm
should have
audible.
been ready.
Sorry. Okay, great.
Yeah, you're still audible.
Oh, okay. Time starts in 3, 2, and 1. At the end of this debate, it's extremely clear that proposition still hasn't proven a single one of their substantives. Throughout this debate, they've pushed multiple assertions on the principle and on the practical as to why it's going to benefit the American public without telling us exactly how it's going to benefit the American public. 3 things I'm going to be doing today, and we're going to analyze the principle, the practical, and finally legislation, because that's arguably what's most important for the average American individual. Firstly, then, on the principle of autonomy, we told you since second that autonomy is not necessarily a good thing, right? And then we called them out at second, and it's also still left unresponded when they never prove to us why more choices equals better choices. Still unresponded to this. Don't let them do this in reply. But secondly, we also told you that autonomy still exists in our side in terms of things like voting, in terms of things like election primaries, or in things of like bipartisan deadlocks that need to be broken through like public support, right? Which means that autonomy still happens on our side of the house. Then we told them that it's going to be even worse on their side because now people are nihilistic. They're less likely to exercise their right to like choose. They're less likely to go into their agency and autonomy and think that it's important, because now these politicians are going there. They're giving them promises. They're telling them that they want to cater to the public, that they want to represent to the for like the majority, but they actually don't because they can't get the support. I told you over and over again why support is extremely important, because it doesn't matter that these people are smart. It doesn't matter if people are capable or that they want to do the right things, or even if they're like a godlike person and simply can do everything. It doesn't matter, because in the end, America is bureaucratic, right? In the end, you need to support the Senate, the Congress, and the House of Representatives for legislation to pass. One person cannot do this if they don't have the party-backed support that is uniquely available on our side of the House. But secondly, then, on the practical, there's several things that come up here, right? But firstly, then, on clarity, and this actually pushes out other points on polarization and international affairs, because we told you that at the point at which American public policy, at the point at which American foreign policy becomes so convoluted, it becomes unclear as to what the people, like these independent people, are going to start doing. That means that polarization is going to increase. People are like people think that the American system is less stable. There's a war on like 2 fronts for all parties, and now international people, like people outside their international affairs and like American American like foreign standings are also going to be worse, because people simply think that it's unclear where America is going, and it's very clear that America is so unstable. So it's less likely that you're going to get like polarization and international affairs, blah blah blah. On that, right? Second, discourse, right? We told you already that if you're talking about the middle class, it doesn't even matter because we already are the ones who are catering to them on our side of the house. One, because the fact that the middle class are the swing people, right? It's not like the people at ends of the spectrum, it's the people in the middle. It's a gray area. That's where like the candidates want to go to. That's where where the two parties want to get their vote from. But secondly, right, the middle class is also the majority, and it's literally 85% of the American public, right? That means the majority and the middle class are always going to be the people at the forefront of their priorities. But then, like on minorities, right, it's still not going to happen anyways because they're not going to access the minority if it's going to give them a minority vote. Then they talk about representation, but we told you clearly, and we've proven this in turn, right? It's less likely because it's one person with multiple like agendas and stuff like that. It's less likely that you're going to agree with us, that the average person is going to agree with us, unless you have an umbrella on our side that tells you like, oh hey, we're going to be more liberal, we're going to be more progressive. Most likely, more people's agendas are going to be met. Thirdly, on legislation, happens on their side of the house, right? Because these politicians cannot get support, there's going to be legislation gridlock, and then legislation cannot pass. So basically, the American government becomes useless. But secondly, they're going to get decisions that stray away from the core of the topic because now they have to make concessions in order to gain the support. But thirdly, they're also going to be short-termists because what they care about is to get a second term, right? They want to ride this wave of like independenceness, and they want to ride this wave so that they're going to get elected again. They don't care about the future. On the contrary, right? We're going to get more clearer like American political agendas in the future, so people want to like opt into America and stuff like that. But secondly, you're also going to get effective legislation with party backing and long-termist views because now these parties still want to have like a more Republican or a more democratic landscape 100 years into the future, not just 10 years in the future. For those reasons, so proud.
Yeah, thanks. I'll reply. Maybe we will come prompt reply to summarize and end the debate for proposition reply. Are you with us?
Sorry, am I audible?
You are.
Okay. So I'll just set up my timer. Okay. Well, I'm starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay. Firstly, here's how I'm going to structure this reply speech, right? I'm going to talk about the process itself. I'm going to talk about the outcome, where Americans are better, and why we win this debate, right? On process. So the aims of the parties versus the reality. Democrats say that they're going to improve lives. Republicans say they're going to improve lives, and third parties are also going to improve lives. But the reality now is, on Democrats, they promise societal change, but focus on international affairs and neglect internal affairs. Republicans do the same thing. They promise societal change and focus on international affairs, neglect of internal affairs. But the difference now is when we have these third party candidates, they promise societal change and focus on societal issues. It is just a priority. On the outcomes now, Democrats worsen the internal affairs or they just ignore them. That is the same thing with Republicans, right? But third parties now, they bring about change that helps some groups. No matter how small, at least they're working and fulfilling their promise. Wins will always add up, and we value all wins, no matter how insignificant they may seem. Now, on where Americans are better, right? On opposition, you're given a choice over two sides of the same coin, right? Democrats or Republicans. Because the choice is mandatory, you're then compelled to lean to one side that has less suffering, but you really would benefit from an intersection where harms are the least, right? We tell you about the gray area, we tell you about individuals who are not leftist, who are not rightist, right? We think to be fully represented, you need better choice. You get it when you have more options. Since it is a democracy, we think that this choice is quite important. But at a point in time where you're only given a choice between the same sides of the same coin, there is no choice. It is just the very same game that they're playing, right? But on our side, then, you now have a third choice, which then breaks the deadlock that is existing in status quo, right? They don't have it better because it's the same side of the same coin. Harms still exist, and all those other things. But now, onto policy making. We think that we actually do better policy making because opposition asserts that policies won't pass, but they're unable to prove why this is necessarily the case, right? We gave you analysis that shows why we create better policies because we give people more choice, we give people greater representation and the nature of the process itself, right? But also, they say that firstly, people will be elected into office and then later say that they won't pass policies due to things such as this lack of support. But this lack of support is actually not going to exist because at a point in time where you have an intersection, both parties and those who don't identify with leftists or rightists all benefit, right? Because of these three groups, we think that when they talk about how it is still going to be leading to some point, we think when you are facing societal issues, you care about everyone in general, right? You're not caring about or prioritizing a certain individual simply because they have this kind of ideologies, right? But also, even if they talk about this short term, right? At least the process and the outcome are better, and we're able to actually provide societal change, right? We're able to bring about this peace, this stability at the point in time where these Americans have it the most. We think that at a point in time where we still achieve it, even if it's a short term, we still make sure that the American public's interests are best achieved on our side of the house. And we've never been more proud to propose.
All right. I would like to thank everyone for the amazing speeches and what was an amazing semi-finals. Congratulations to the winners in our. So you all can leave the room so that I can deliberate with my panelists. And also you can stop streaming too. I think the round is over. You all can cross hands, shake hands, enjoy yourself in the briefing rooms while you wait for the final result to be called. Thank you guys so much. The remaining teams in the room should please leave. And observers too. Opposition. Okay,